Sorter on Parmenides. 19 fragments are all that remain to us of Parmenides' work, and one of them is a Latin translation, fragment 18. No text of the complete poem has come down to us from antiquity. The same is true of the poems of Xenophanes and Empedocles. Instead, we have quotations from their poems in the works of other ancient writers, and the task of scholars has been to collect these quotations, collate them, and put them into the order, despite gaps, from which they appear to have come. Nor is it easy to say, once this has been done, how much of the original remains to us. In the case of Parmenides' poem, it is generally supposed that we have the whole of the introduction, most of the second part concerning being, but only a small fraction of the last part. We can, however, be fairly sure of the order of Parmenides' fragments because they come from a single poem, and one which has a clear and conventional structure. The poem opens with a description of a chariot ride, which takes the poet to the palace of the goddess, who tells him the rest of the poem. This introduction is a more elaborate form of Homer's invocations of the muse at the beginnings of the Iliad and the Odyssey. It is strictly the muse who sings the poems. The poet is there as himself only to introduce her. More like Parmenides' introduction is the longer beginning of Hesiod's Birth of the Gods, where Hesiod sings of how the Muses came down to him while he was shepherding his lambs near Mount Helicon, and inspired him to relate the generation of the gods. Parmenides is a poet more like Hesiod than Homer in this too, that his poetry is didactic rather than narrative. Its message is not suitable for story. But the message is very clearly set out by the goddess in her palace, who indicates in several places just where she has reached in her exposition and what she is to speak of next. And this despite her saying that it makes no difference to her where she begins, since she'll be coming back to there. Fragment 5. It may make no difference to her, but her clear directions to her argument are of the greatest help to us, who have no better means of ordering the fragments we have of it. The poem opens with a description of a chariot ride, which brings a rider to a goddess who is to teach him. Given the need for an opening, we might have expected a sea journey as more apt to the experience of Parmenides' people. But there are echoes of that experience throughout the poem. The rider travels a road which takes the man who knows through every city. Of the Greeks of their time, the Phocaeans were the most widely travelled, and the Eleans still more so, who had for some time been without a city of their own. The chariot ride is potentially frightening to the rider. The goddess in the palace tells him to take heart. It is a good and not an evil destiny which has brought him to her. We remember the long journey from Phocaea to Eulalia of the evacuees of Parmenides' people, and the subsequent escape from Eulalia in 20 damaged ships and the enemy fleets abroad. The words of the goddess guarantee safe conduct, and Eleans would know the force of them better than most. There is, I think, an allusion to the Phocaeans, who broke their oaths to sail to Eulalia and return to Phocaea in the denunciation of people who know nothing, for whom to be and not to be are the same and not the same. Fragment 6. These Phocaeans swore oaths by the gods, and then went back on them, which is as much to say that they first distinguished between the real and the unreal, and then confounded the two. The path of them all was backward turning, literally and metaphorically. On this interpretation, these lines are similar to Xenophanes' attack on the luxurious habits of his former compatriots, the Colophonians. But that was Xenophanes himself speaking, as far as we know. Here it is the goddess. If these words apply to the forsworn Phocaeans, they are condemned by the goddess for turning back, as the rider is encouraged in his having taken a road far from the path of people. This connects the circumstances which led to the founding of Alea with its rapid rise to philosophical prominence. The Eleans were granted a special revelation as a reward for their persistence. Because they had held fast to the real and kept straight on, they were permitted to see the real more clearly, a privilege accorded by justice, who brings and admits the rider to the palace of the goddess who tells him about it. Perhaps finally there is a connection between Parmenides' chariot ride and the horse races established by the Argileans in honour of the dead sailors. Whatever the historical and philosophical implications of the poem, it opens with a fine description of a chariot ride from the point of view of a rider. Everywhere there is the noise and motion of things performing at their peak. The axle post shrieks in the boxes. The horses are free of the rider's control. The great doorposts of the palace, studded with bolts and pins, revolve in their sockets with a mechanical perfection. Alarm and exhilaration, beauty which is the terror we can still just bear. This is the authentic epic world we recognise from Homer. Everything is well made or well done, the very best of its kind, glittering and resonant at the limit of its potential. Who has ever gone as far or as fast as his heart could desire? There is a road, certainly, and it resounds, but it is the road of a demon goddess. There are maidens, but they are the daughters of the sun. There are gates, but they are the gates of night and day. There is a palace, but it is the palace of a goddess. For Homer, too, there is no difference in kinds between the worlds of gods and men, and so the world of men is made ideal. There is nothing here which cannot serve as a support for the divine in the perfection of its earthliness. And that being so, we must take the chariot ride seriously. However much we derive from it symbolically or analogically, it is still a chariot ride to a palace. In the same way, whatever a ritual means, it is the ritual that matters. It generates the meanings, not the other way around. The chariot ride is a powerful poetic symbol because it could be an actual symbol. There is nothing in the opening lines which could not have been ritually enacted. There are several poems of this period, and in this metre, which describe rituals. It is likely that this is one of them, and the chariot ride was an actual and repeated event. It is a kind of triumph. An unusual feature of these opening lines is the indefiniteness of the people, animals, and objects they describe in their relations to each other. Consider the horses. They are female fillies or mares, and they rush along the road which they know, straining at the car. Then suddenly they are maidens leading the way. Then we hear of neither horses nor maidens through the lines concerning the axle. Two teams, both of females, and both doing the same work. It is hard to keep the maidens distinct from the horses. The horses are wise in their knowledge of the road. The maidens wisely persuade justice to unbar the palace doors. The maidens talk, but then so do the immortal horses of Achilles in the Iliad. These similarities would not be remarkable by themselves, but they are compounded by others between the parts of the chariot and the parts of the palace. The burning chariot axle is turned in the boxes by the two wheels. The bronze doorposts are turned in their sockets by the opening of the two doors. The chariot has one axle and the palace two doorposts. But it is the similarity between axle and doorposts which the poet seems to stress. For example, he describes in full how the two wheels of the chariot drive the axle round, which elaborates the parallel with the turning of the doorposts by the opening of the two doors. In the Greek, this is more noticeable still, since axon appears in both descriptions, first meaning axle and then doorpost, and so too does syrinx, first meaning pipe and then socket. In this way, the horses are transformed into the maidens, the chariot wheels into the palace doors, the axle into the doorposts, the boxes into the sockets, the burning into the bronze. Chariot and rider enter the palace with horses and maidens, bringing everything together at the palace of night. But everything has been brought together in another way too, by the ambiguous and echoing description. The indefiniteness of these lines is unusual, and we ask whether the poet intended it. The goddess in the palace gives some reason for supposing he did, when she tells the writer at the end of the first fragment to learn how the things that seem are all of them passing through everything. On our interpretation of these lines so far, we can see how they achieve an interpretation of two things in two different ways. There is the straightforwardly physical collection of all the people, animals and objects at or in the palace of night. The passage of chariot, maidens and horses through the gates and into the palace is the prime instance of this physical penetration. Others are the passing of axle, keys, door bar and posts through their various apertures. Then there is the merging of horses with maidens and chariot with palace through their similarities to each other. These ways combined would still not be enough to effect a complete passing of all things which appear in these lines through all. Not everything here becomes everything else. Perhaps in the end nothing quite does. But if it is the purpose of these lines to achieve the interpenetration of things as far as they may, then the indefiniteness I have pointed to has its place. It is no more unusual than the poet's purpose, which the goddess in the palace describes, and which is affected in other ways by story and metaphor. Who is the goddess who receives the rider and tells him the rest of the poem? Her name is not given because there is no need to give it. The inference is clear. The first words of this goddess address the rider as the companion of the horses who have brought him to her palace. There is only one mention of a palace or house before this, or indeed anywhere else in the poem as we have it, and that is the palace of night, which the maidens leave to escort the rider to the goddess. So the goddess in the palace must be Night. Night is a very ancient goddess whose house is also described in Hesiod's Birth of the Gods. It is fitting that the speaker of the rest of the poem be Night, because Night was an oracular goddess who gave words of wisdom to the people who went to her home for them. The chariot ride, we may say, is the process of consultation. The only problem is where exactly Night's house was, since it was a matter of debate among the ancients. Hesiod seems to place it in Hades, near the Styx. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century AD, tells us in a myth that Orpheus had said that Night and Apollo shared the oracle at Delphi. But according to the myth, Night and Apollo have nothing in common. Instead, the oracle of Night has no single location, but wanders about. Plutarch was himself a priest at Delphi, and this gives weight to his view on the issue. But it was an issue, and the myth's resolution is drastic since it has to attribute a faulty memory to the great Orpheus. Euripides tells a different story. According to him, when Apollo came to take possession of the Delphic oracle from the earth goddess Gaia, she let him and then played a trick on him. She sent up prophetic dreams at night everywhere on earth, and so nobody needed to consult the Delphic oracle anyway. Apollo went to Zeus, who told Gaia to stop it, and all the nocturnal oracles went back where they came from. The Pythian prophetess at Delphi, the Sibyls of Asia and Italy were living embodiments of Parmenides' goddess Night. They too spoke their oracles in hexameters. According to one of Diogenes' sources, Pythagoras was taught by the prophetess Themistoclea at Delphi. Parmenides was a disciple of Arminius, who was a disciple of Pythagoras. Truth is told by a maddened woman in an underground cave. Night was at the very centre of early Greek thought. Not until Plato wrote The Republic in the 4th century BC did light become the primary image of truth, which it has remained ever since. Before Plato, it was mostly the other way. Homer was reputed blind. His minstrel Demodocus in the Odyssey was blind. His wise man Tiresias was also blind, and according to one tradition, had been a woman as well as a man. Parmenides slept for decades in a cave. Heraclitus was known as the Dark because of the obscurity of his doctrines. There was Sophocles' Oedipus, who thought he could rule Thebes by his own wits and the courage of his manhood, but who discovered in the end what the Delphic prophetess and Tiresias had known all along. He blinded himself. These examples of truth as dark, not light, they emphasize the inadequacy of light as a way of knowing. Plutarch suggests that Orpheus was wrong about the oracle shared by Night and Apollo at Delphi, but Sophocles had felt and evoked just such a tension between the dark and light of Delphi a long time before Plutarch. The emphasis on darkness in the earlier period was an indication of the sacred nature of knowledge, its inaccessibility to merely human understanding, its requirement that we approach on its terms, not our own. It is a marvellous thing that the first and arguably clearest account of being which we have is the doctrine of a dark lady. She is the one at the heart of well-rounded truth. The writer is there only while with her. The speech of Night is often accounted the first philosophical reasoning in the West which has survived.